Now let's take a look at how to deform a mesh using the skin modifier. Now this modifier uses the character's skeleton, either a bone-based skeleton, a cat-based skeleton, or a biped, to deform the mesh. So this is actually just a simple modifier that we can add to our stack, and then we can add in the bones to that modifier. So I'm going to start off by selecting my character mesh and going into modifiers, and under animation we have skin. Now the skin modifier, if we scroll down here, has a place where we can add in the bones in the scene. Now if we look in our scene here, we've got basically a right and left thigh, shin, toe, and foot, and those are all connected to some hips. So let's go ahead and select our object, go into the Modify panel, and find the skin modifier. And then we're going to go ahead and add in some bones. So this brings me into a browser, and it just shows me the bones that are available. And I'm just going to expand this so I can see them all. So I'm going to go hips, thigh, shin, foot, and toe. So that should be all of the bones that are relevant in this scene. So let's go ahead and hit select. And when I do that, they add in. And now the deformer should be working. So if I were to select one of these bones, I can rotate it and notice how the mesh deforms. Now if I want to actually fine-tune this deformation, I can. And we can do that through the modifier. But before I do that, I'm actually going to do a little trick here. I'm actually going to do some animation on the bones, so that way we can just scrub through the timeline to check our deformation. So I'm going to leave it in its default pose, and I'm going to go ahead and just set a key for the thigh and the shin on the left leg. Then I'm going to go ahead and just scrub forward, turn on auto key, and then just kind of do just a little bit of an animation here. I'm going to make sure that that's at local. And there we go. So now you can see I'm getting a bit of a deformation. And you might be able to see this a little bit better if we turn on edged faces. You can see the mesh on the geometry here. So as you can see, when it's moving out like this, you can see how this thigh is kind of coming out as well. So let's go ahead into the modifier. I'm going to select my character mesh and go into Edit Envelopes. Now what this does is it allows me to go through and select any one of these bones in my solution and edit how those bones affect the mesh. In fact, let's go ahead into wireframe to see this a little bit better. So you can see that this left thigh bone has this kind of capsule around it. Now I can affect the size of the capsule in one of two ways. I can interactively left click and drag one of these points here, and notice how when I drag it out it adds more in, or I can make it smaller. And so the goal here is to make it about the same size as your geometry here. Now if I scroll down here, you can see that this radius is also controlled by this number here. If I want to, I can also add in cross sections if I want. So if I wanted to add a cross section in here, I could, and then I can select that cross section and go back into move mode, select the cross section, and manipulate it. So you can do some pretty good fine tuning here. Now if you want, you can also go a vertex at a time. And when I have this in place, you can see how when I scrub it now, I'm getting pretty good animation. Except on this side, I'm getting the opposite effect, so this leg is affecting it. Now one of the things we can do is we can do mirroring. So if I go into mirror mode here, I can actually select and paste left to right. So if you notice here, I've got a center plane down the middle, and that's that orange plane there. And so everything to one side is blue and the other side is green. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to paste blue to green. And what that does is it changes the deformations on this side to match the ones on the other side. So now when I manipulate that, notice how this is much better. Now another thing we can do is we can go in a vertex at a time and manipulate those as well. If I go into my skin modifier here and I scroll up, you can see I can also select vertices. So if I want to, I could say select these vertices here, and I could grow them or I could shrink them. And then I can go through a bone at a time. So let's say I don't want these to be affected by the left thigh, so I select that. And then I can go down here to weight properties, and I can either dial it up or down. So now if I dial them up to say 0.76 on the absolute effect, notice how those are affected. And as I dial them down to 0, they become unaffected. So as you can see, this is a great way to connect a deformable mesh to a character. So the process is basically add the skin modifier, check the deformation using an animation, and then manipulate the envelopes and then the vertices to fine-tune the deformation. And then once you get one side of the character finished, you can mirror that over to the other side.